Today, I'm at the National Museum of the United States Air Force, and the airplane behind me is the B-29 Superfortress Bockscar. This is the plane that dropped the second atomic bomb on Japan in August 1945, effectively ending World War II.
This is it. This is Bockscar, B-29 that flew the last atomic mission over Nagasaki. Just 3 days before the Enola Gay had dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima. But Imperial Japan, somewhat to our surprise in the US, did not surrender with that first bomb. This bomb that was dropped from the airplane is the second and last atomic weapon that was used in war. As museum artifacts go, this particular artifact is a little bit more eerie than typical. When you think about what this plane accomplished, but also what it did, it is a little unnerving, honestly, to be in its presence. Bockscar was specially modified under what they called the Silver Plate program. These planes were designed specifically for atomic missions. Unlike the standard B-29s, these modified versions had no defensive turrets or armor. They were lighter and faster, that gave them greater range. They were also fitted with these larger bomb bays to carry the atomic weapons. And these modifications enabled the Silver Plate B-29s to take on these critical, high-stake atomic missions, like the one that etched this airplane into the history books.
The atomic bomb Fat Man. Fat Man atomic bomb was the weapon that ended World War II, delivered by this plane, the B-29 Bockscar, over Nagasaki, Japan, August 9th, 1945. It's big and at the same time amazingly small for what it was capable of. In addition to the example of the Fat Man bomb here, there is an example of the Little Boy atomic bomb. This was the bomb that the Enola Gay dropped on Hiroshima. Both of these bombs were originally operational weapons. They have, of course, been demilitarized for display purposes, but they were originally operational. These two weapons were very different, but they were developed simultaneously by the U.S. military to ensure that if one design had issues, that you would have this other design that could give you success. Little Boy was a uranium bomb and it had a simpler gun type detonator, while Fat Man was a plutonium-based bomb and it used a more complex implosion style design to initiate the reaction. The plutonium bomb is the more powerful of the two. But the two versions gave the U.S. a backup approach to get to their atomic goals.
Bockscar was powered by 4 of these Wright R3350 duplex cyclone engines. This is an 18-cylinder radial engine, 9 cylinders up front, 9 cylinders mounted behind those. It produced about 2,200 horsepower and was burning 100 to 125 gallons of fuel per hour. So 400 to 500 gallons per hour for the airplane. These were supercharged engines, and they were able to help this aircraft fly at higher altitudes than what other previous bombers had flown, 31,000 feet. This was higher than most Japanese fighters were capable of reaching. So they were able to fly in relative security compared to what they would have been able to fly in at lower altitudes. This aircraft was also the first pressurized bomber that the U.S. had, and so the pilot and his crew were able to fly in relative comfort without an oxygen mask, without being bundled up in the freezing temperatures. The engine on display here is the way that they would have received an engine from their maintenance facilities. They would have taken the old engine out of the aircraft, taken some of the parts, presumably parts that weren't wearing out as fast, put them into this engine, and put that engine into the aircraft to keep this thing flying. They were not the most reliable engines, so they required a lot of maintenance. They had to be switched out fairly regularly to keep these airplanes in the air. Alright, so the Nagasaki Mission, August 9th, 1945. They had trouble right from the start. They had a fuel pump that wasn't working, which meant that they couldn't get fuel out of one of the tanks. They had to still take the fuel with them, but they couldn't access it. Then they were supposed to rendezvous with a photographic plane to document the mission. When they got to the rendezvous point, the plane wasn't there. They circled for another 45 minutes and the plane never showed up. So they've used up more fuel. Then they go to Kokura, which is the primary target, not Nagasaki. But that area was covered in smoke from a recent bombing. They had been instructed, even though they had radar bombing capabilities, they had been instructed to do a visual drop because they wanted to film it. They wanted to have the information about what happened. So they made multiple passes over Kokura looking for an opening, and they couldn't get it. So now they fly to Nagasaki. Nagasaki is covered in clouds, and they're debating, what are we going to do? They have this bomb with an altitude sensitive detonator, so they don't want to land the airplane with the bomb in it, fearful that it will go off. They don't want to drop this very expensive, one-of-a-kind weapon over the ocean without using it. So they're concerned about it, but they know they're running out of fuel. Finally, they get an opening, and they see the target, and they drop the bomb and get the heck out of there. One of the crewmen later said that when the bomb detonated, it was as if somebody had taken a telephone pole and was beating the aircraft with it. It was so violent. So they're very low on fuel. They can't get back to the base that they took off from with the fuel that they have. So they land in Okinawa. And by the time they were landing, engines were starting to sputter and stop. And by the time that wheels touched the ground, they'd lost one engine, and by the time it had stopped, they had other engines that were starting to sputter. So it was really close call for the guys that were on this airplane.
This picture is on display at the museum, and it shows a completed bomb, Fat Man, being loaded into Bockscar. This photograph depicts Bockscar en route to Japan with the atomic bomb. This is a painting of Bockscar depicting the dropping of the bomb. The photo on display here at the museum shows the aftermath of the explosion. Smoke rising after Fat Man bomb exploded over Nagasaki. You can see the wing of the aircraft in the photo. This is a photo depicting Nagasaki after the atomic bomb. There's really nothing recognizable in that picture. Formal surrender ceremonies took place September 2nd, 1945, above the USS Missouri, Tokyo Bay. The war was over. Bockscar was stored in the desert, and this is it in 1959. This is the aircraft delivery receipt for when the airplane was transferred over to the museum. This is a picture of when Bockscar was delivered to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1961, where she still is today. So it has been here for over 60 years. Actually predates this building. There were about 4,000 B-29 bombers that were built, and of those 4,000, there are only about 30 that exist today, and of those 30, only 2 are in airworthy condition. This is the Shiden Kai, which is Japanese for Violet Lightning Improved. This Japanese plane is one of the best fighters that the Japanese had. But they still were really no match for the B-29. These airplanes that the Japanese had were losing power, significant amounts of power, by about 21,000 feet, while the B-29s were capable of 30,000 feet. So they had a hard time reaching them. This is one of only 3 of these planes that have been restored.
2 B-29s dropped the 2 atomic bombs which ended World War II. The Enola Gay, which is at the Smithsonian, Aerospace Smithsonian, dropped a bomb like this. This is called Little Boy. This is a uranium-based atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. This is Bockscar. This dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki. This plane ended World War II.
So I'm not a historian, I'm just a guy who visits interesting places, museums, attractions to share them with people who might want to see them. This is a military museum, and this exhibit focuses on the aircraft, the mission, and how a country came together to defend its way of life, even if that meant taking these extreme measures. This exhibit isn't a deep dive into ethics or compassion for what was then an enemy. I think that's another conversation for a different museum. But with close friends who are Japanese, I feel it's important to recognize the immense impact that these missions had on humanity. This was a brutal war, and there's a reason that this was the last time a nuclear weapon was used on human beings, and it's a powerful reminder of the heavy cost of war and how many lives were changed forever. When you're standing here in front of this airplane, it makes these events that we've read about all these years seem even more real. You're in its presence. It's right here in front of you. Something that you can reach out and touch. The history we've read about, the events, they're as real as this airplane. And especially, I think now, as we're living in this world where most of the people who lived through this are no longer with us. Bockscar, just as it looked back then, is this powerful physical reminder that these stories aren't just stories. They're real, the achievements, the sacrifices, the consequences. And this plane brings us closer to all of that. It sits here as this reminder of everything that happened. If we just take a moment and pay attention. I'll see you down the road.